Hello, everyone. I'm going to be talking about the 5 protective factors that are involved in the Strengthening Families approach that is designed to increase family strengths, enhance child development, and reduce the likelihood of child abuse and neglect. I'm going to talk about why these 5 protective factors are important, and I'm going to talk about some research findings that support them. Because of the ACE study, we all know the impact that ACEs, or adverse childhood experiences, have on the developing child. The more trauma or adverse childhood experiences that a child has early on in life greatly increases the chance of developing mental health issues, physical health issues, and even increases the risk of early death later on in life. These ACEs include things like child abuse, or having a parent that is depressed or has other mental health issues, or has a parent who is addicted to drugs or is an alcoholic. But we also know that having ACEs doesn't necessarily mean that health issues will develop later on in life. Resiliency is another important factor. Resiliency acts as a buffer or a barrier that protects children from the effects of these adverse childhood experiences. There are 5 protective factors that have been found to increase resiliency in families and children. These protective factors are parental resilience, social connections, knowledge of parenting and child development, concrete support in times of need, and social and emotional competence of children. So the first protective factor is parental resilience. Studies have found that the majority of parents who were maltreated as kids do not maltreat their own kids, even though about 70% of parents who do maltreat their kids were abused or neglected by their own parents when they were kids. So how are these parents who were abused as kids able to break that cycle of abuse and neglect? The most important factor is developing the capacity to empathize with the self and with others. These parents were able to develop into psychologically healthy, highly functional adults because of their capacity to develop caring personal relationships, engage in personally meaningful work, including parenting, and have faith in the positive potential of themselves and the world around them. This capacity is thought to be sparked and nurtured through the experience of supportive, caring relationships. The second protective factor is social connections. Research has shown that there are important connections between social isolation of parents and the occurrence of child maltreatment. Social isolation is primarily caused by individual problems that need to be addressed. The relationships of non-neglecting mothers are characterized by trust, reciprocity, flexibility, and a balance of independence and mutual assistance. There was a study done in 1998 of 9 mothers who were incarcerated for fatal child abuse. They all had been actively connected to social networks during the period leading up to the murder of their children. A major factor that perpetuated the women's abusive behavior was the reassurance that they received from members of their social networks that they were good mothers whose abusive behavior constituted an understandable lapse in what was construed to be otherwise acceptable maternal behavior. This shows that the type of social connections that a parent has is important. The third protective factor is knowledge of parenting and child development. Professionals have observed that child abuse and neglect is often correlated to a lack of understanding of basic child development. Adults who physically abuse children commonly have inappropriate expectations of children's abilities and assess their children's behaviors in excessively negative ways. Common stresses of child rearing, such as colic, night waking, separation anxiety, exploratory behavior, negativism, poor appetite, or resistance to toilet training, may trigger harsh punishments or episodes of abuse. And according to a study of abusive parents, thumb sucking and bedwetting are the most common cause for beatings. The fourth protective factor is concrete support in times of need. Research has shown that family poverty is the strongest factor known to be correlated with child abuse and neglect. A study done in 1996 showed that children living in families with annual incomes below $15,000 per year were over 15 times more likely to be abused and over 44 times more likely to be neglected than those with annual incomes of $30,000 or more. It was also found that poor children were about 22 times more likely to die or be seriously injured as a result of maltreatment. In 2001, poverty was associated with over 57% of child maltreatment cases. The theory behind this is that poor parents are highly stressed and they have low levels of material resources that could help them cope. This stress may cause the parents to become hostile and aggressive towards their children. It also may precipitate the development of distressed psychological states associated with neglect, such as depression, low self-esteem, and low feelings of self-efficacy. The fifth protective factor is social and emotional competence of children. Child characteristics are not believed to be a primary cause of child maltreatment, but kids with difficult behaviors are at greater risk of being caught in an escalating cycle of conflict with parents, which may involve physical abuse. Kids develop their social and emotional competence early on when they play and make friends. The quality of their social relationships affect their sense of self-worth, competence, and overall view of the world. Research has shown that early social development tends to set kids on a path towards either social competence or deviancy in middle childhood and adolescence. Also, an infant's primary attachment to a caregiver is very important. Kids that have a poor attachment to a primary caregiver are at risk for developmental problems and are more likely to develop emotional problems later on, such as depression, anxiety, and behavioral disorders. Because of all the research and studies that have been done, it makes a lot of sense that the strengthening families approach would focus on these 5 protective factors in order to increase resiliency in families and children.